Dressed like a bat. You're out of your mind, Bruce Wayne.
Welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy. It is time for us to talk about the Justice Leagues. Now, for years now, we've been making these versus videos where we compare two similar movies and point out like one scene that expresses why one is way better than the other. Usually we do a Marvel versus a DC movie. Now, I've spent a lot of time criticizing Zack Snyder's choices for the DCEU, but I also made a really flattering portrait of his influences as an artist. You should really check that one out. But as much as I disagreed with Snyder's take on Superman, his vision for the Justice League is far, far better than what the studio slapped together in 2017.
Booyah.
Now, the behind-the-scenes problems with that movie are very well documented and being litigated in court somewhere, I'm sure, so I'm not going to rehash every little detail of the production. So, before we start, here is the brief TLDR on the Justice League's production. Warner Brothers hired Zack Snyder to oversee the new DC Extended Universe, meant to be a counterpoint to the MCU. Now, after the lighthearted Green Lantern movie flopped,
You're welcome, Canada.
the studio decided they wanted to match the dark tone of the Nolan Batman film. So Snyder was an ideal choice. His Watchmen movie was gritty, it had superheroes, and Warner Brothers decided, great, that's our guy. Now, Snyder's first two movies in the series, Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, had their very vocal supporters, but the movies also had problems.
Save Martha!
More traditional fans like me hated these new takes on the heroes, and the studio decided they wanted the Justice League to be fun and zippy, like those Marvel movies.
Catchphrase.
The problem is, it was already 2016, and Snyder had already shot his Justice League movie, and he was in post-production. But then he suffered a terrible tragedy and stepped away. So the studio took advantage of that disaster and brought in the guy who set the tone for the MCU team-ups, Joss Whedon. They brought him in to Marvelize the movie for them. Now, Whedon has claimed that he thought he was being hired to fulfill Zack Snyder's vision, but he was also apparently an ass on set. He claimed the cast were asses back to him, Henry Cavill wouldn't shave his mustache, you know the whole thing. Now, I'm retelling all this because the way Whedon was hired greatly affected the end product, the 2017 Justice League. If he would have had full creative control from the start, I'm sure Justice League would have been a good movie, but instead, we got this weird hybrid of a movie where there's no artistic vision, no soul, and events only occur because they have to so we can get to the end of the movie. As different as these two versions are, I think you can distill these differences into just three categories. 1, how scenes move the story along. 2, the tone of the movie, that's the overall look and feel. And 3, and most important of all, how these movies introduce the characters and build the lore of these heroes. Now, this last point is key. So there's one scene that I think defines these differences, that shows us why one movie's this, and the other is this.
We should work together more often.
You mean like a team up?
Exactly.
And that scene is the introduction of Aquaman. Now, both scenes occur near the beginning of the movie. So first, let's go over how Snyder and Whedon chose to open their stories. The Whedon version opens with this baffling cell phone cam of Superman, which right away showcases Henry Cavill's fat mustache lip. The scene is pointless, does nothing, and only accentuates the movie's flaws.
It's meant to wind like a river. It comes and goes.
People don't talk that way. I mean, congratulations, you managed to write some dialogue worse than Martha. The next scene is another reshoot. Not a surprise, since some reports say up to 75% of the movie was reshoots. Even though in reflection, that seems a little high. This scene is Batman apprehending a crook in Gotham City. Now, it looks fake and cheesy, almost like a 90s Batman movie. But in any other movie, I'd kind of be fine with that. A fun, zippy comic book story that's obviously filmed on set with a Denny Elfman score.
What are you doing?
I mean, any other day, sign me up, but here, it's misplaced and silly. The big problem with this scene is that it's unnecessary. He kills the parademon, and the encounter is supposed to motivate him to recruit more heroes. But all of that groundwork was already laid down in Batman vs. Superman. Lex tells him about an incoming invasion.
The bell's already been rung, and they've heard it.
And then he tells Diana that he's off to look for more people.
Help me find the others like you.
I don't know, maybe the studio wanted an action scene at the top, who knows? But this is one thing that really gets me about the Whedon version. Warner's told him they wanted a movie at 2 hours tops. So he was assigned to make cuts, not to add totally unnecessary scenes. After the stupid rooftop scene, we get a montage that reinforces that Superman is dead, which is confusing because I just saw that he was alive in cell phone footage. Unless you paid close attention to the date, here you're thinking, wait, Superman's back already? The cell phone, he's back on the cell phone, and then all of a sudden he's dead again. It's very confusing. Snyder's version opens with the Superman death montage, beginning on the kryptonite spear, showing us the reaction around the world and then taking us straight to Bruce's journey to find Aquaman. In the Whedon version, this falls much later and it's been cut to hell. Now, we made a split screen that shows the parts that were edited, added, reshot, all of it. And we're going to use that split screen to show you exactly how Snyder's version is superior. For starters, the Snyder version shows Bruce Wayne journeying through the ice for 1.5 minutes, just him and the opening credits. And it's important because it shows how much he believes this team needs to come together.
Come together.
Now, what we're going to see when we look at this is that these two directors had very different goals. Whedon wanted to create like a fun, zippy narrative that took you from point A to point Z. It's what the studio wanted, another Avengers. But Snyder wanted to immerse you into this world. He wanted to paint a canvas so vivid and such exacting detail that you felt like you wanted to linger here for 4 hours. And you can see this all over this scene. Snyder's Batman takes 15 seconds to walk down this path. In the Whedon version, it's 3 seconds. But the crucial thing you're going to notice in this scene is that in Snyder's version, he focuses way more on the villagers. The first person to speak in the scene is the old man, who's like the fishing mayor, I guess? They're not really clear about that.
Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne.
So throughout the scene, Snyder lingers on people because he wants you to get a feel for who these people are and how they're scraping by for a living. But why does he want that? Because if we understand how poor they are, then we will fully appreciate how much Arthur means to them. Both scenes contain the same exposition about this.
I believe there is a stranger who comes to this village from the sea. He comes in the winter when the people are hungry. He brings fish. He comes on the king tide.
But the Whedon version tells us the information, while Snyder is showing us. Aquaman stays half out of frame, and his reveal is a lot more slow and dramatic, with a slow turn in the Snyder version. In Whedon's version, it's an insert shot of Jason Momoa turning around. You can also see throughout the whole scene that it was filmed to look very dark, with the only natural light coming in through the windows. Snyder intended to have this very high contrast between the shadows and the highlights. You can tell that Whedon tried to bump up the color, but there's only so much you can do when a scene is filmed in a certain way. So when you try to raise the brightness of a clip that's filmed dark, there's not enough light for your editing software to make sense of the image. So everything will look pale and unnatural, like this. What we end up with is this weird random highlight on Ben Affleck's cheek. Whedon also tries to add saturation to the image to give the whole movie a brighter feel. Again, the problem is the image wasn't filmed to be saturated. Snyder wanted it to be muted. But when Whedon reshot most of the film, his new scenes were intended to be bright and highly saturated, which is only one of the reasons it's so easy to spot the reshoots in this scene. See how in the reshoots Bruce doesn't have this shadow on his face? Whedon supplemented the sunlight with light from another source to eliminate that shadow. Now personally, I don't really like the desaturation Snyder does. The Dark Knight is arguably the most gritty superhero movie ever made, and the universe still pops with color. But this is what Snyder intended, and it's how his movie was filmed. Now, like I said, the most important difference between these movies is how they choose to build their worlds. Because this is no ordinary superhero movie where you get to show an origin story and they fight a bad guy, you introduce the supporting cast, etc. And this is no ordinary team-up movie like The Avengers, where audiences are already familiar with the heroes. Heck, I mean, Justice League isn't even like Guardians of the Galaxy. That movie at least had one protagonist, and everyone else slowly enters his orbit. Justice League is an ensemble movie where, like on paper, everybody's supposed to be an equal. 3 of these heroes have barely appeared on screen before this point. So the Justice League has a heavy load to carry. It has to establish 1. The tone and feel for the universe. 2. The movie needs to establish a villain with a compelling motivation who also feels like a credible threat to so many heroes. And 3. It has to introduce 3 new characters, their origin stories, their powers, their desires, and find a place for them to fit in the movie's narrative. And 4. We need to know how these new characters fit into this universe. Now this step is overlooked. In Iron Man, we see that the public loves Tony Stark and perceives him as a hero, and this public opinion is carried on throughout the other movies. Life in the MCU isn't all that bad for ordinary people. It's bright, and things all seem to be going just fine. The Snyderverse was intended to be a counterpoint to this. Things aren't fine. The world is ugly and complicated, and the arrival of the heroes doesn't really solve problems, it just makes the world more complicated. So let's look at how Snyder and Whedon approached world building differently. I already mentioned that Snyder stays more focused on the villagers. Like here, when Bruce Wayne pulls out a wad of cash, Whedon cuts away, but Snyder shows a girl grabbing it and bringing it to her family. A little way of showing just how much these people need the money. You can also see how Whedon strained to find the comedy in this scene, like here.
No could visum allowed to me of the person.
Now notice Whedon gives Aquaman subtitles. Remember that for later. Then, in the reshoots, as people are laughing at Bruce, Ben Affleck has this kind of dumb look on his face, and you know that it's a reshoot because his hair is different and the scene is overlit. Then, he sees this mural of the mother boxes, which he recognizes after the parademon was killed earlier. This is like a tidy way to move the plot forward, but in universe, it's really silly. There's no reason the people in the village would tell the legend of the mother boxes. It ties them to a bunch of sci-fi rigmarole when they're just fishermen. The only thing magical about them is that Aquaman brings them fish to eat when they are hungry. The villagers are here to show what Aquaman means to them, not to tie into the overall sci-fi plot. So this insert is silly, and it's supposed to be a shortcut for Bruce to find out about the mother boxes, but it doesn't actually save any time in the movie because later on Diana explains the mother boxes to him anyways. So then, in the Snyder version, the old mayor yells at Bruce Wayne for a bit and Aquaman tells him to leave. Whedon added in this response.
Can you at least point me to Atlantis?
Terrible. Bruce knows nothing about Aquaman or the existence of Atlantis. In the Snyder version, here is Bruce's response. So this is great, and it does a few things. It's Bruce standing his ground. It's him saying that he understood Arthur's little joke at his expense, and he doesn't care. This is his way of saying that he has knowledge, and knowledge is power. Arthur is a proud man, and he doesn't like Bruce getting the upper hand on him. So he does this. In the 2017 version, he does this because of this line.
Can you at least point me to Atlantis?
Then we get this really cool moment in both versions, when Batman formally introduces us to the first movie Aquaman.
Arthur Curry, also known as Protector of the Oceans, the Aquaman.
But Whedon undercuts how badass this moment could be with this line.
I hear you can talk to fish.
So Whedon is constantly inserting his own voice into a scene that was written and filmed to be serious. At best, it's like an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. But at worst, it's like a really awkward person on the couch trying to make fun of the movie you're watching.
On movie night, I need to blow these punks out of the water.
So in the Snyder version, we don't have that line. We go outside. This is the final section of the scene, and it's the most important. This is where we really see what separates the Snyder Cut from the Justice Cut. So, in both cuts, both of them walk outside while Batman fills him in on who he is and his secret identity.
Worked for 20 years in Gotham.
Oh, that shithole.
But then the Whedon version adds in this line.
People from Atlantis told me to do this.
Now you say do that.
Now, obviously, this is all additional dialogue recording because we don't see Arthur say it, so it was added in after the fact. His single line is meant to replace the entire Willem Dafoe scene that comes later.
Take up your mother's trident.
Alright, so every new character in the Snyder Cut was given 3 personal introduction scenes. One where we find out what they want, one that establishes their personal relationships, and one where we get to see them use their powers. This is followed by them being approached to join the team. Now for Aquaman, the scenes are meeting Bruce, saving the fisherman to show off his powers,
It's on him.
and the mirror scene establishes his estranged relationship with his mother.
I knew her.
Well, that makes one of us.
But the Volko scene is about establishing the politics of Atlantis and how he fits into this world.
You can't turn your back on the world forever, Arthur. Above or below.
Now, look, if we're being real here, the problems with this movie started even before they filmed Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. Warner Brothers wanted Avengers money without taking the time to put up solo movies first. So they required a movie that was essentially 4 movies in one, and then demanded that movie be under 2 hours long.
And bid them make bricks without straw.
This is an unfair mandate for any filmmaker, which is why I can't be too mad at Joss Whedon for any of these creative choices. But it sucks. Using a throwaway line to describe how much he hates Atlantis doesn't carry near the gravitas of having an actor of Willem Dafoe's caliber explain this to us.
You're the rightful king of Atlantis.
But again, Snyder, much better at building his world. But hey, you want to see something really bad? Like a line that's supposed to be funny but is just awful?
Strong man is strong as alone. You ever heard that?
That's not a saying. That's the opposite of what the saying is.
I hate this line because it's basically Whedon criticizing a line in the original script. It's petty and pretty indicative of the on-set behavior that he's been accused of. Alright, so then in both versions we have this line about Superman.
You ever hear of Superman? He died fighting next to me.
My point exactly.
Then the Whedon version goes off on a rant about the polar ice caps and asks,
What's in the 3 boxes?
and then this.
I don't mind if the ocean dries.
Oh, that is some ugly, ugly looking green screen work there. You see this all over the movie. Whedon had to reshoot so much of the film to add in all his great dialogue that the cutaways to CGI environments are jarring as hell. The roof in the room looks more realistic.
I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
So, in the Snyder version, instead of all that crap about the polar ice caps, the focus stays on Superman.
I believe we were stronger together. We owe it to him.
Because, and this is important, Superman is the reason Bruce is doing this. His entire motivation. Superman inspired him to stop being an asshole and work with others. Alright, so then both versions have this.
Dressed like a bat. You're out of your mind, Bruce Wayne.
Then the Whedon version shows Arthur going into the water. I prefer the Snyder version where he's just kind of gone. It's like more magical that way. Then the Whedon version cuts away.
Doesn't mean I'm wrong.
But the Snyder version stays. And this is my favorite scene in the entire movie. Screw Flash going into the Speed Force. This scene is genius. The best scene in the movie is when these Icelandic women linger at the sea to sing a song to Aquaman. At first it's so silly, but it takes itself so seriously that you're forced to take it seriously too. This woman just inhales his sweater and it's not played for laughs. In this scene, you really get a sense of what Aquaman means to these people. He's not a punchline. He is their savior. See, being a hero is pointless if we don't see the people the hero is saving. Snyder stays on these people for 74 seconds so we can hear their song and briefly exist for a moment in their world. It's immersive. They continue to sing after Bruce leaves, a way of showing that this is Aquaman's true world. These are his people. The scene creates a cultural distance between Bruce and the villagers, which extends to a personal distance between him and Arthur. But also, this is not a scene that zips the plot forward. It doesn't serve the story, and like I said, it's a little ridiculous, but it's still powerful because it puts us in the world. It hits home that in the MCU, we spend time in the world of superheroes, but in the Snyderverse, the heroes spend time in our universe. Slate had a great quote about Joss Whedon's work on this movie. Whedon is famous for subverting tropes, not supersizing them. The trouble is, once you demythologize unfathomably powerful beings so much, you lose that mythic feeling, and what's left starts to seem a little bit silly.
Sorry, guys. I didn't bring a sword.
But that's just my thoughts. Let me know yours down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash the bell. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.